Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today because the House of Representatives has a responsibility and a duty to protect the integrity of this institution. And what we learned from the documents released by Jeffrey Epstein's estate is nothing short of alarming. Those documents show that Delegate Stacey Plaskett, a sitting member of Congress, coordinated her questioning during an official oversight hearing with a man who is a convicted sex offender, a man whose crimes against minors shocked this entire nation. Let me be clear, this was just not casual contact. There were deliberate communications, and they shaped her official line of questioning in a congressional hearing. The American people expect honesty, the American people expect integrity and judgment from their elected officials. They expect members of Congress to conduct themselves with one word: decency, not to seek advice from a predator who exploited minor children. This resolution does not accuse. It acknowledges what is documented. It censures Delegate Plaskett for her conduct, removes her from the Intelligence Committee, where her judgment is paramount, and directs a full investigation into the extent of her relationship with Mr. Epstein. Some will try to spin this as politics, but protecting the honor of this body is not partisan. It's not Democrat, it's not Republican. Standing against a convicted predator's influence in our proceedings is not partisan. It's basic decency. We cannot pretend this didn't happen. The American people deserve better. Speaker, I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
And I rise in opposition to this resolution. We're here today on the floor to support the complete disclosure of information related to Jeffrey Epstein and his billion-dollar international child sex trafficking ring. And our side of the aisle, at least, supports the release of information relating to anybody who had anything to do with it, whether they're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, or what have you, period. We insist on complete, full disclosure. This resolution has nothing to do with that. This seems to me to be one more pathetic effort to distract and divert attention from the fact that the president's name appeared more than 1,000 times already in the small fraction of material released on Epstein, and from the failure of the majority to move to disclose this information. And it is this bipartisan group that we've had behind the discharge resolution which has insisted on bringing this to the fore, and we've got nothing but obstruction, opposition, resistance, evasion, distraction, and diversion from the other side. And now we get one more resolution like this. The resolution actually proposes a disciplinary censure against Representative Stacey Plaskett, but amazingly alleges no misconduct. It does not allege the violation of the Constitution. It does not allege the violation of a federal law or a state law or local law. It does not even allege a violation of the ethics rules of the House of Representatives, and yet they want to censure her and throw her off of her committee. This, a distinguished former federal prosecutor, diligent public servant, representative of the people of the Virgin Islands. Now, criminal justice has two parts to it. One is insisting upon legal accountability for people who do wrong. The other part of it is due process, which may be the two most beautiful words in the English language, certainly the two most beautiful words in the Constitution of the United States. It's due process that protects all of our freedoms and our rights against the arbitrary power of government and the will just to punish somebody without any process at all. But that's exactly what's going on here. Think about it. Ghislaine Maxwell had due process. She had a right to counsel. She had a right to hearing. She had a right to hear the evidence against her. She had a right to put on her case. She had a right to cross-examine. She had a right to a neutral, impartial tribunal. She had a right to unanimous verdict of a jury, and all of that she had, and she was found guilty. And that's why she was sentenced to jail for 20 years, even though Donald Trump has transferred her from a real prison to a prison camp where she's gotten very special pampered treatment, like she's in a Trump hotel. She gets room service to her cell. She gets gym privileges other inmates don't get. She gets to use the warden as a go-between with people outside of the institution and so on. But in any event, she had due process. Donald Trump had due process. He was convicted on 34 felonies, but he had the right to counsel. He had the presumption of innocence. He had a unanimous jury trial right. They had a right to cross-examine everybody, put their own witnesses on. Now, they want to take a former United States prosecutor, the representative of the people of the Virgin Islands, and without even going to the ethics committee, much less a court, they want to arraign her on some charges based on a newspaper article that she did something lawful. However ill-advised it may have been, she took a phone call from one of her constituents. Now, I don't think it is the position of the very distinguished gentleman that if we find Jeffrey Epstein on the phone with Donald Trump, he should be impeached for it, or is that his position? Is his position that any time Jeffrey Epstein got somebody on the phone, and he got a lot of people on the phone, that person is suddenly guilty? That sounds like guilt by association. That sounds like collective guilt. Our minority whip introduced a perfectly reasonable amendment to say, let's refer this to an ethics committee. Let's have a real hearing. They didn't want to have a real hearing. They want to rush to judgment. Why? So there can be some headline that will please Donald Trump tomorrow instead of a unanimous statement, or forgive me, I think the distinguished gentleman from Louisiana may have dissented, but an otherwise unanimous verdict of the House of Representatives that the American people want all the files open. We've had enough of the cover-up. We want all of the truth. We want the survivors and the victims to have the possibility of accountability. Well, they want to give them another headline, which is that they've arraigned a Democratic member for taking a phone call from her constituent, Jeffrey Epstein, in the middle of a hearing. And of course, I don't think there's any rule here against taking phone calls in a hearing. Now, if you want to actually give her the chance to explain what happened, then we would take it to the ethics committee. I still don't see what the charge is. Where is the ethical transgression? Where is the legal transgression? Are you saying anybody on your side of the aisle who had a phone call with Jeffrey Epstein should be censured? Be careful your answer there, because there's a lot more that's about to come out, right? So you should think about what is the principle behind this rush to judgment. I want to close just with this thought, because I know there were a lot of people in the chamber who were here when this happened, and a lot who weren't. There was a move to expel George Santos, who was a Republican member of the House from New York. And it was the same kind of rush to judgment, absolute political frenzy. And I looked at it for about 60 seconds. And then, I was a professor of constitutional law, so call me a legal nerd. But I said, wait, this guy's not been convicted of anything. Well, he's a Republican. Yeah, I know he's a Republican. He was not convicted in criminal court. To my knowledge, he had not been arraigned yet or convicted of anything in the ethics disciplinary process. They just said, well, there's bad press. We want to get rid of him. Beware of what you wish for. Is that the rule that you want here in the House of Representatives? That you can just draw up a member of Congress in 24 hours or 48 hours because there's a bad newspaper article without asking any questions, without giving that person any due process at all? Is that what it's come to at this point? I mean, all we're asking for in the Epstein files is release the materials so we can check it out. They want to go ahead and censure and remove from a committee a distinguished member of the House of Representatives with no due process at all. I reject this. I hope the whole body will reject this, just like I voted and spoke against removing George Santos, a Republican on the other side of the aisle, because he had gotten no due process. I hope all of our colleagues will reject this absurd rush to judgment and attempt to change the subject here. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, before I yield time to my good friend in Louisiana, Representative Raskin, I will be careful in my remarks. You need to be careful with your facts. You have an 11-year veteran of this body who should know better. You have an 11-year member of this body who took money It wasn't a newspaper article. It was a fact. She took money from Jeffrey Epstein. It's ironic that you're taken up by defending Ms. Plaskett, which it's going to the Ethics Committee, but she's lost her willingness or lost her ability to serve because she got irrational judgment by taking money from a convicted pedophile of young children. And it's unfathomable that you're taking the position that you are. These are facts. You mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell. She's not a sitting member of Congress. She, as a sitting member of Congress, she has relinquished any sense of duty to serve on these committees. With that, I want to yield as much time as needed for my good friend in Louisiana, Mr. Clay Higgins.
And the chair would remind all members to please avoid engaging in personalities to direct all comments to the chair. The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized.
I thank my colleague, Mr. Norman from South Carolina, and I thank my colleague, Mr. Raskin, for the salient points that he has brought to this debate. I also defended George Santos on this floor and opposed the means by which he was expelled. I think it was beyond the pale, and this is a responsibility that we bear in this body, is to determine the means by which our colleagues shall be reprimanded or disciplined. And the Constitution is clear on this. My friend, Mr. Raskin, knows full well that this body controls the means by which and the rules by which the members of Congress shall be disciplined. So we've had variances of opinions regarding, the exact disciplinary actions that should be embraced or rejected, member by member. But let me say that in this case, Ms. Plaskett's receiving text messages, this was so alarming to me. When I saw this and read it, I didn't believe it. I say to my friend, I thought perhaps it was media from a satirical site. It couldn't possibly be true, because we all know that a text message, a text exchange is rather intimate in the realm of communications. And to pierce into an actual congressional hearing for a member of Congress to receive and respond to a text message during a hearing, that is quite familiar, is it not? And this was shocking to me, that a member of Congress would be exchanging text messages directly with Jeffrey Epstein in 2019, at which time he was being prosecuted federally by the first Trump administration. He had received some nature of a sweetheart deal back in 2007 and avoided federal prosecution by pleading no contest to some level of state prosecution, where he was sentenced, Mr. Speaker, to 13 months. My understanding, he did 11 months, and at the easiest time that could be done. He walked every day during the day on a work release program. So that sweetheart deal, let me say, should be looked at. And now, to my horror, who has come to light that should be looked at? What was her involvement? Was there some involvement then? She's a good lady from the Virgin Islands. Where did Jeffrey Epstein live? In the Virgin Islands. She was a constituent in 2019. Was she a friend in 2007? During her service to the DOJ, which my friend has brought up, was there any interactions? These are the questions we have. The good lady from the Virgin Islands has crossed the threshold of reasonable suspicion, and therefore she should be investigated. during said investigation by ethics, and I would recommend by DOJ, and I would recommend by oversight and judiciary committees. Meanwhile, she should absolutely be removed from the House Select Committee on Intel. This, Mr. Speaker, is my position. I presented without note for the betterment of the debate of this body, and I yield my time back to the gentleman from South Carolina.
I reserve.
From South Carolina, the gentleman from South Carolina reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's always a pleasure to hear my friend from Louisiana. Both of the Republican speakers have said this demands an ethics investigation. I think Mr. Higgins just said it should be investigated by oversight and by judiciary, as well as by ethics, as well as by others. This resolution censures her and punishes her before there's been 1 day of investigation. There's been no investigation at all. That was the whole burden of the minority whip's amendment. It was to say, let's have an investigation, refer it to the Ethics Committee. That's why the distinguished gentleman from Louisiana and I both voted against, and we got a majority to vote against censuring or expelling even George Santos without any ruling by our ethics disciplinary body. Isn't that putting the cart before the horse? I don't get it. I wish one of you could explain that to us, why we should censure her before there's been 1 day of actual investigation. If being on the phone with one of our constituents, even an evil, sinister force like Jeffrey Epstein, and of course, he has said that he considered Donald Trump the most evil person he ever met. He said, without a redeeming bone in his body. So I agree, people can say different things, but Jeffrey Epstein, to me, disgraced himself. But in any event, people want to know, well, what were the contents of that conversation? Why was Ms. Plaskett doing that? I'm sure she's got a good explanation. We're talking about a distinguished lawyer and federal prosecutor who was in the middle of a hearing, which is something that members do all the time, is to talk to people in hearings about different things. But let me ask, if it's now the standard that just to be on a phone call with somebody establishes guilt by association, what about all the members of this body or of the U.S. Senate who were on the phone with January 6th insurrectionists and President Trump and his associates who were trying to block the certification of the election as people were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence"? A lot of phone calls, a lot of traffic going on. In fact, that's why our Republican colleagues dealt themselves $1 million cash payoff bonanza provision in the most recent Republican spending bill. They put that in there because their phone records had been subpoenaed lawfully by a grand jury. They were treated like every other American citizen because their names came up as potentially being involved in that conspiracy to somehow shut down proceedings in the House and the Senate. Now, are we saying just because they were on a phone call, they're guilty of something, we should strip them of their committee assignments? We should censure them? Have we gotten to that point? I mean, come on. This is the House of Representatives of the United States of America. Let's stick by the Constitution. Let's stick by due process. Let's go through the rules. I yield 5 minutes to my distinguished colleague from Connecticut, Representative Himes.
The gentleman from Connecticut is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from Maryland. I'm not going to speak today about Jeffrey Epstein or January 6th. I'm going to confine my remarks to 2 things that I know about. And I'm going to take a deep breath right now, because to stand here and to have to listen to the gentleman from Louisiana in the guise of just asking questions besmirch one of the finest members I have had the honor of serving with, I would think would offend the sensibility of anybody in this chamber. But I'm going to limit my remarks to 2 things I know very well. Number 1, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and what we need to do to preserve that very special environment. And number 2, the character of Delegate Stacey Plaskett. On HPSI, I've served for 10 years. And with Chairman Turner and now with Chairman Crawford, we have fought for that decade to keep the Select Committee on Intelligence immunized from the sewage that flows through this chamber, the partisan attacks, the hideousness. And by and large, we've been pretty successful, with one exception. When that committee got involved in the political investigation around Ukraine in the first Trump administration. Every single day, the leaders of that committee work hard, establish friendships, and do the work we need to do to make sure that the toxicity and the sewage that we're hearing right now don't impinge the critical work of making sure that our intelligence communities are keeping Americans safe and not violating civil liberties and not doing things inconsistent with the desires and character of the American people. This effort, put forward by a bunch of people who haven't served on that committee and who have no idea the comity and the grace with which that committee serves. You, sirs, will hurt this committee badly. And I expect every Republican on the Intelligence Committee, and I'll say it again, I expect every Republican on the Intelligence Committee who know Ms. Plaskett and who know the committee to vote no on the idea that without evidence and without due process, Ms. Plaskett should be removed from that very special committee. This resolution would strike a devastating blow to HPSC's ability to work effectively by removing a member in good standing based on a newspaper article about texts. No due process, no evidence, nothing offered other than a newspaper article which has moved the gentleman from South Carolina, a member who is consistently engaged in a bipartisan and productive way with the committee's work, to make some unrelated political statement will do profound damage to this essential committee. Now, let me just talk for a moment about Ms. Plaskett. I've served in this institution for 17 years, longer, I think, than most people in this chamber. And I have not had the honor of serving with somebody with the integrity and the commitment and the hard-working bona fides as Ms. Plaskett. We can argue about the wisdom or the judgment associated with those texts. I'm told that apparently Mr. Epstein was a constituent. But on any one of us, our worst day, our biggest misjudgment is not to be judged without any due process, especially in the context of this superb member, this critical member of the Intelligence Committee. The result of this resolution, if it were to pass, will be to undo the efforts of the Republican Speaker and the Republican Chairman of the Intelligence Committee, Mr. Crawford, to restore the committee to what it was intended to be. And while the bill for that decision won't come due immediately, it will come due over time in the form of a less accountable and less effective intelligence community with less effective oversight for Congress. So I don't expect the gentlemen who have offered this up to back down now, but I do expect every single member of the Intelligence Committee that elect those few who understand what it is we need to do to close the door on the flow of partisan sewage which we see now threatening the critical work that we do. Vote no on this appalling resolution. I yield back.
We reserve.
The gentleman from Connecticut yields back to the gentleman from Maryland. The gentleman from Maryland reserves. The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Speaker, can I inquire about how much time we have left?
2.5 minutes.
2.5 minutes?
22 and a half
22
minutes.
and a half minutes.
Yes, sir.
Let me just say, for my good friends on the left, you know, we're hearing words. That's all this is, words. You're taking the side of a young lady who should have known better. She served for 11 years. She disparaged herself. She did it to herself. This is not smoke and mirrors. This is actual text that pretty well indicts Ms. Plaskett. Would she probably take it back? Yes, but it's too late now. I want to yield as much time as needs to be consumed by my good friend from Texas, Chip Roy.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I thank the gentleman from South Carolina. I thank him for bringing forward this important resolution before the body. I do want to say I appreciate the gentleman from Maryland, his commentary about the vote on removal and his considered judgment with respect to Santos, and I agreed with him at the time and made the same points. I want to align myself with the remarks from the gentleman from Louisiana, but I want to note in doing so, and I think the gentleman from Maryland has shown respect to, I think, the judgment of the gentleman from Louisiana about his being the sole vote on the issue before this body before with respect to what we're making public because of the gentleman's, I think, very real concerns about what it might mean for victims. And we had that debate and a colloquy back and forth in the Judiciary Committee a few hours ago. about what we can do to ensure victims are protected and so forth, as we all go forward in what I believe is a unanimous view that we should go seek out truth and justice here with respect to Epstein and anybody associated with him and them and the nefarious affairs involving Jeffrey Epstein. The reason that I support this resolution is, and I would note that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, they could have tabled this resolution. They chose not to table it. They chose to refer it, which suggests to me that there's a recognition that something here is not particularly good, that we've got a sitting member, in this case the delegate from the U.S. Virgin Islands, who was sitting in the Oversight Committee. And I'm actually a particular interest here because I was the one doing the questioning. Apparently my questioning was so riveting that she was engaging in text messages back and forth at that moment. While I was questioning Mr. Cohen, the gentlelady was engaging in this back and forth on text messages with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, again, I've listened now for months. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle disparage and try to impugn the character of the President of the United States and other members of the administration in connection to an investigation of Jeffrey Epstein, which the President, his administration in 2019, they indicted Epstein. They actually moved forward and federally indicted him in 2019. Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested by the Trump administration. And I know the gentleman from Maryland will go on to say that the Biden administration then carry forward that arrest and indictment into prosecution. True. But it was, in fact, the Trump administration that did what had not been done for a long period of time by taking forward that indictment. So I've been listening to all of the preaching by my friends on the other side of the aisle about how any association, anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein is somehow the dispositive moment here in terms of determining the character of this administration or what they're doing or not doing when they're leaning in to try to seek the truth. Where tens of thousands of pages have been released by Jamie Comer and 13 subpoenas has all been put out. So now the House just voted to have greater transparency. Time will tell what that means in terms of what the court does and how they deal with grand jury secrecy and what they do to continue to redact and protect victims' names under existing laws and how the courts treat that. That's going to be a process, as the gentleman likely knows, right? This is going to be determined as to what gets released and how. But here we have the gentlelady sitting in the Oversight Committee texting with a known convicted felon, a convicted pedophile that was very public and known, had served jail time, and is engaging not just in texts that were trivial, but texts involving advice about her questioning of Michael Cohen, all designed to figure out how to get Michael Cohen to be able to somehow go after Trump or Trump's advisors or people around the president. That, to me, is what we talk about with censure, which is contemplated, of course, in our rules and in the structure. The gentleman talked about the Constitution. We're not removing her. We're simply saying censure. And we're saying that it is a censurable conduct to say that this individual sitting on a committee taking advice from a known convicted pedophile, convicted felon, that is conduct unbecoming of a member of the United States Congress and engaging in real time, taking advice from someone that we've been listening to being lectured to is someone deserving of all of the scorn of the entire world, and he is. That's why we're here. If my colleagues didn't think this was a concern, they would have simply made a motion to table. But my colleagues decided to refer it to committee because they know this is a problem. They know this is not the kind of conduct you want in a member of this body. So I think that the gentleman from South Carolina is right to have brought this forward. I think that the body should hear this debate, and tonight that we should vote tonight to censure and refer to the Ethics Committee for further consideration. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from South Carolina.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my friend from Texas for those remarks. I'm afraid all of them dance around the central issue, which is the good congressman knows how due process works in America. There are facts that are adduced first. There's an opportunity to be heard on both sides. There's due process, there's consideration, then there's judgment. You've flipped the whole thing on its head. You've said we're going to judge her guilty before anybody has an opportunity even to hear what the charges are, much less answer the charges, much less do any kind of analysis. I'm sorry to hear that the text exchange that it seems to be at the heart of people's consternation here took place during the distinguished gentleman's questioning, but that is not a federal offense, nor is it an ethical violation in the House of Representatives. You don't get to have the undivided attention of all of your colleagues. The gentleman says that he thinks that our position is that any association with Jeffrey Epstein is a dispositive moment of judgment for people. That's not the position we've advanced. We've taken the position with the survivors that we want to end the cover-up of what happened and then let the chips fall where they may. If there are people who were actually engaged in crime, as Ghislaine Maxwell was, as Epstein was, then they should be charged with every element of due process. If they happen to be a waiter or a waitress who works at an event, they're not guilty of anything. That's what due process is. We're able to sift through and figure it out. But your rush to judgment isn't even giving anybody a chance to know what the charges are here. It's the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen. I'm going to yield now to Delegate Plaskett herself, the distinguished representative from... Oh, I'm sorry. First, we've got Representative Crockett from Texas for 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. This is a distraction to take away from the fact that the Guardians of Pedophiles is literally trying to protect pedophiles. The president is a convicted felon and an accused sex offender. Stacey Plaskett hasn't been accused of either. So what are we actually here talking about? Trump and Epstein were besties. We've all seen the pictures of them. We saw the birthday book. So why are y'all more interested in talking about Stacey Plaskett than Trump's relationship with the man? When did y'all become so moral? Because I can remember when y'all wouldn't sign the discharge petition. All of a sudden, everybody wanted to vote for this, but you wouldn't sign the discharge petition. Until we decide that we are going to go after the actual rapists and pedophiles, miss me with your moral high ground. Folks who also took money from somebody named Jeffrey Epstein, as I had my team dig in very quickly. Mitt Romney, the NRCC, Lee Zeldin, George Bush, Win Red, McCain Palin, Rick Lazio. I just want to be clear. If this is the standard that we're going to make, just know we're going to expose it all. And just know that the FEC filings, they are available for everybody to review. This is absolutely ridiculous. You decide that you want to punish a sitting member of Congress because you are concerned about her text messages. Well, maybe you should be more concerned about those sex tapes that we still haven't gotten access to. Maybe you should be more concerned with the fact that the president, his name is mentioned in the files way more than Stacey Plaskett's name. Listen, I'm not saying that anything is right or wrong, but listen, if you're trying to figure out what's going on with somebody that's a criminal, then you maybe need to talk to their associates. That's exactly why maybe she was getting text messages. I'm not saying she was or wasn't. But considering the fact that they were talking to another associate of the president's and maybe she needed intel, you'd have to go talk to somebody that maybe knows what he's up to.
Time has expired.
We reserve.
Gentleman from Maryland reserves. Gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Speaker, I recognize my good friend from Arizona, Mr. Biggs.
How much time is the gentleman recognized? How much time you've allotted the gentleman from Arizona?
How much time do we have left?
The gentleman has 17 minutes remaining.
As much time as the gentleman may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Norman. Thank you for raising this issue. This to me, this is an interesting issue because I'm hearing the argument is coming at us and it says, well, you know, there's no due process. Well, debate is a part of due process. That's part of due process, is to have this debate. You get to stand up, you get to defend, and get to raise your issues, and you chose to take it back to committee, which, as Mr. Roy said, that kind of indicates that maybe you know that there's something that's that's not great about this. So I'm looking at this, and here's at least one of the exchanges that seems to have taken place. And maybe we'll hear some comment about it. That'd be good. You can make some comment about it. But in this exchange, Mr. Epstein sent a text message to the gentlelady from the Virgin Islands, and this is the quote. He brings up Rona, keeper of the secrets. And who's he referring to? Rona Graff. That's a Trump assistant. And Plaskett responds, Rona, question mark? Quick, I'm up next. Is that an acronym? So she wants to know what Mr. Epstein wants her to talk about. Don't you find that interesting? I find that really intriguing, especially since we know what Mr. Epstein was. And Epstein responds, that's his assistant. Doesn't really say much more than that. And then Plaskett starts questioning Mr. Cohen and asks about Graff. So not only was she texting, having this communication with Mr. Epstein, she's asking Mr. Cohen what Mr. Epstein wants her to ask. Another text says, from Epstein, good work. That's after she wraps it up. All of this seems to be very interesting. And I'm sorry, I don't breathe the rarefied air of the Intelligence Committee. I don't. I'm just a regular guy and a member of the House. That's all. So I don't know about that rarefied air, and I guess I'm part of the sewage. That Mr. Himes said. Yeah. Thanks for agreeing with me, Ms. Plaskett. So she's got us down. Unless you're in the Intelligence Committee, you're crap. That's what the Intel Committee says. But here's the deal. When you're sitting there in a sitting committee and you're having communications with a convicted sex offender, and you're taking their advice on how to ask questions, maybe you got a problem. Maybe your problem is that you've brought disrepute on the House. And this isn't from the articles. This is from the 10,000 pages or so released last week from the Oversight Committee that they received from the Epstein estate. This isn't fishing around. This is coming from real evidence. So I sit here and I listen. Oh, she's the finest member that ever walked the planet, man. That's what you heard. But the bottom line is this. She's sitting there seeking advice and counsel on how to ask questions from Jeffrey Epstein, who this entire body, save one, just condemned. And we want all the evidence. And it's a shame to be here, but for one thing, you made the choice. And so, Mr. Chairman, I'm encouraging everyone in this body to support Mr. Norman's resolution, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields.
Speaker, I reserve.
Gentleman of South Carolina reserves. The members are reminded to direct their commentary to the chair. Before I recognize the gentleman from Maryland, please remind yourself, as well as the members, to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the president. Does the gentleman seek recognition?
Yes, I do.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you very much. I want to remark that yet one more member says we should go ahead and censure her, and then we should do a complete investigation. I think any fifth grader in America knows that's the exact opposite of what due process means in America. We don't punish people before we have investigation and the opportunity to be heard. I yield 6 minutes now to the distinguished gentlelady from Virgin Islands, Representative Plaskett.
Thank you so much to Mr. Raskin, to my former professor in law school, and I want to address the body. I first want to give you all a sense of what was happening that day. Everyone knows at that hearing in February, The entire country was watching. As Michael Cohen decided he was going to finally give up information about what was happening in the Trump world, the Trump enterprise. And at the beginning of that hearing, the ranking member, Jim Jordan, had the disrespect to Elijah Cummings, may he rest in peace and his name be a memory, after not allowing Mr. Jordan to shut the committee hearing down. And I turned to Mr. Jordan and told him to have respect for the chair and to basically shut up. And that moment went viral. And I began to get innumerable texts from friends, from foes, from constituents about what was happening in that hearing. And I got a text from Jeffrey Epstein, who at the time was my constituent, who was not public knowledge at that time that he was under federal investigation, and who was sharing information with me. Now, I heard recently from someone that I was seeking advice from him. Let me tell you something. I don't need to get advice on how to question anybody from any individual. I have been a lawyer for 30 years. I have been a narcotics prosecutor in New York City. I have had the honor of being a political appointee at the Justice Department after September 11th as a Republican appointee in the Bush administration. I know how to question individuals. I know how to seek information. I have sought information from confidential informants, from murderers, from other individuals, because I want the truth, not because I need them to tell me what to say. And if you look at the transcript, you will see that I questioned Michael Cohen for 5 minutes. The Washington Post only shows you 30 seconds and takes from it one individual's name that I got from Jeffrey Epstein and didn't know who the individual was, and put that individual with a host of other individuals that I felt the committee should subpoena. They've never been subpoenaed. They've never been questioned. Because at the end of the day, I know that in the Trump administration and with my colleagues over there, it's not about sexual assault. It's not about support of victims. It's about money. It is about money. I have consistently stood against sexual violence and the exploitation of women and children in previous careers as well as here in this body. We all know that Jeffrey Epstein's actions were absolutely reprehensible. As a constituent, as an individual who gave donations to me, when I learned of the extent of his actions after his investigation, I gave that money to women's organizations in my community. Not back to him, but to women in the community who needed that support. That's what I think should have been done, and that's what I did. They've taken a text exchange which shows no participation, no assistance, no involvement in any illegal activity, and weaponized it for political theater, because that's what this is. This has been reviewed by federal courts. Any charges, victims who initially had a case against me dismissed it on their own without prejudice. You don't want to talk about what is really happening here. Your attacks on working families, your protection of powerful predators and corporate criminals. You want to talk about texting felons. How often do you text President Donald J. Trump? That's the individual we should be concerned about. And let me tell you this. I am not going to support the wealthy and connected who continue to exploit workers and evade taxes, powerful figures with credible allegations who face no consequences, and corporate interests profiting from human suffering while families struggle. And let me tell the people of the Virgin Islands.
Gentleman will state his point of order.
The point of order is you may not call the President of the United States a felon. That is a violation.
Point of order is under consideration, and we're not going to lose order here either, so please.
May I continue? May I continue, Mr.
Members
Speaker?
are, however, reminded to refrain, as mentioned a little while ago, from making personality commentary towards the President. The point of order is not timely, so the gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What is happening here? I feel sorry for my colleagues. I feel sorry for this body. I see members coming and speaking against me who I've never even had a conversation with. You don't know me. You don't know the work that I've done. You don't know the support that I've given to families, to individuals, to support people. I worked a full-time job with children under the age of 5, going to school, law school at night. Do you think I would risk my law degree for any individual? Never mind a reprehensible individual by Jeffrey Epstein, I would not. But what I'm about is the truth. And let me tell the people of the Virgin Islands, this attempt at intimidation will pass. We in the Virgin Islands do not back down from a fight. That is how we won our freedom, and that is how we will continue to grow our equality. And if you censure me, take away a committee, I will still do the work because I am here to support people and to support this great Constitution, which I have sworn numerous times to uphold.
We reserve, and I thank the lady.
The gentleman reserves. Gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, before I recognize Mr. Clyde, let me just say, Ms. Plaskett, I don't know you. My overall impression of you has been good. But, and you give these words about protecting families and children. Where was that demonstrated when you took money from a convicted pedophile that had served time? Where was that? The words are beyond believability. And I think you're a nice person, but you missed the boat when you took money. I've got the mic now. You lost your I don't know the word to describe it, but what you did, you deserve to come off the committees. And let me remind you, we want this to go to the Ethics Commission. And to those listening, the Ethics Commission is 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans. Let them find it. But in the meantime, you do not deserve to serve on a committee with national clearance. And I would like now.
Will be reminded again to direct their commentary to the chair.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to recognize my good friend from Georgia, Mr. Andrew Clyde.
How much time is the gentleman shall I recognize him?
How much time is left?
You have 11 and a half minutes remaining.
5 minutes.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. My good friend, Mr. Norman from South Carolina. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of this resolution censuring and condemning Delegate Stacey Plaskett of the U.S. Virgin Islands for inappropriate coordination with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein during a congressional hearing and removing Delegate Plaskett from the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and referring her to the Ethics Committee for further investigation. After 4 years of silence on this matter, not a peep during the entire Biden administration, let me repeat that, after 4 years of silence on this matter about Jeffrey Epstein, House Democrats are now demanding transparency and accountability surrounding Jeffrey Epstein and his associates. While their fake outrage is clearly just another disgusting attempt to smear President Trump, House Republicans are taking this matter seriously and are working toward delivering the much-needed transparency and accountability that the American people deserve. This resolution is accountability, page 1. During the House Oversight Committee's ongoing investigation into Jeffrey Epstein, emails obtained by a congressional subpoena, that's right, it was the congressional subpoena by the House Oversight Committee, not the discharge petition that just got voted on, but this was the Oversight Committee's congressional subpoena, has brought to light that in 2019, Delegate Stacey Plaskett coordinated her line of questioning with Jeffrey Epstein in real time over text messages during an oversight committee hearing featuring testimony from Michael Cohen. Now, who is Michael Cohen? Michael Cohen was the disgraced former attorney of President Donald Trump. She was asking input from Jeffrey Epstein on how to best question Cohen, and Cohen was himself at that time a convicted felon from 2018. So now that Republicans are exposing Democrat ties to Jeffrey Epstein and his vile crimes, the other side of the aisle has flipped. They apparently no longer want transparency or accountability. Why? Because they don't want the truth. They want to weaponize a serious matter into a distraction, all in an attempt to take down President Trump and to hurt his administration and what he's doing to make America great again. The actions taken by Delegate Plaskett reflect poorly on the House, and this body needs to hold her accountable. I urge all of my colleagues to vote to adopt this resolution to show the American people that those who colluded with Mr. Epstein, including members of the House, will be held accountable, and this resolution is the beginning of that. I thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields.
To the chair.
Speaker, I reserve.
Gentleman from South Carolina reserves. Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Proud to yield 1 minute to the distinguished Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries.
The Minority Leader is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the distinguished gentleman, my good friend from the great state of Maryland, the ranking Democrat on the Judiciary Committee, for yielding. I rise today in strong opposition. This resolution, this effort to censure Delegate Plaskett, to rip away her membership on the Intel Committee, is nothing more than a political stunt by a desperate, failed candidate for governor, trying to pander to the people back in South Carolina. Nothing more than that. You want to make the statement about who's brought disgrace to the House? The actions of this House Republican majority have brought disgrace to the House of Representatives from day one of this presidency. The reality is, if you want to talk about fealty to the Constitution and things of that nature, the House is a separate and co-equal branch of government. You don't seem to understand that. You functioned from the very beginning of your so-called majority, Mr. Speaker, not as a check and balance on an out-of-control administration, but as a reckless rubber stamp for Donald Trump's extreme agenda, and you are failing the American people. You failed to keep your core promise. Your core promise to the American people was that you were going to lower costs on day one. Costs haven't gone down here in the United States of America. Costs have gone up. The Trump economy is a complete and total failure. It's a disaster. The American people are hurting. And so every week, you come to the House floor now that you've returned from your 7-week taxpayer-funded vacation and come up with another stunt to try to distract the American people. Or perhaps you were ordered by your puppet master, Donald Trump, who wants to distract the American people today, because his effort to suppress the Jeffrey Epstein files has failed spectacularly. We believe in transparency. We believe in accountability. We believe in due process. That's the opposite of what is happening on the floor today. And let me be very clear about Stacey Plaskett. She's a woman of great intelligence and a woman of great integrity. And she deserves better than what she's receiving from House Republican extremists. She deserves the opportunity to be heard. She deserves due process. She deserves the ability to make her case, not to be prosecuted by petty foggers playing lawyer on the floor of the House of Representatives. Google that if you don't know what it means. The so-called Freedom Caucus want to lecture us about proceeding at this moment. The actions that you continue to engage in will have consequences. Consequences today, consequences tomorrow, consequences next week, consequences next year, and certainly consequences when the American people
throw this House Republican majority out in the aftermath of the election next November. Be very careful about the extreme actions that you continue to engage in. Now, it's extraordinary to me, week after week, censure after censure, and I wonder, is it just coincidence that the last 3 censures we've had on the House floor happen to involve, first, you tried to censure LaMonica MacGyver, and then, Mr. Speaker, Republicans tried to censure Ilhan Omar. And now we're on the floor, and you're trying to censure Stacey Plaskett. What is it exactly that those 3 individuals have in common? House Republicans are going to have to answer for the things, the extreme things that you continue to do. And the American people know this is a phony majority. It's a fake majority. It's not a real majority. Republicans aren't doing anything to make life better for the American people. And that's why we're on the floor right now. There's nothing that House Republicans can do to disgrace Stacey Plaskett because House Republicans continue to disgrace themselves. And so whatever happens later on this evening, the American people will hear from Delegate Plaskett beyond this, making her case. The people of the Virgin Islands, I'm confident, will continue to stand behind her. And we will never be lectured on issues related to accountability and transparency and principle and ethics from this group of extreme House Republicans who continue to visit a national nightmare on the American people, bending the knee to a wannabe king, doing real harm in real time, and at the end of the day, your time is coming as well. I yield back.
Chairman yields.
Hey, how much time do we have, Mr. Speaker?
Gentleman has 4.5 minutes. 3.5 minutes. All members are again reminded, including Minority Leader, to direct your comments to the chair. All members are again instructed, including Minority Leader, to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the President. The gentleman from Maryland seeks recognition.
No, we'll reserve.
Gentleman from Maryland reserves. Gentleman from South Carolina.
Speaker, I find it interesting that the Minority Leader mentioned that, we got a, not really a majority. I will tell you, 77 million people are a majority. They rendered the consequences to elect the president that has revived this country from a disaster 4 years under the Biden administration. Let's go back under a little bit of history here about the hearing. The messages show that Plaskett texted Epstein before the hearings that started that day at 7:55. She texted him, the sex offender, the predator on the children she says she protects. They had comments like she told Ms. Plaskett talk about his grades. She mentioned that she had a great-looking outfit. This is from Mr. Epstein. In 10:40, she broadcast a feed cut to Ms. Plaskett showing her moving her mouth as if she was chewing something. And Ms. Plaskett mentioned that she had multiple texts. Well, according to the records, and I don't know how many of her texts came from those convicted of felonies, but on at 2:25, Epstein sent 2:25 minutes before Plaskett began questioning Cohen at 2:28. Epstein messaged back, "Good work," at 2:34, 1 minute after Plaskett finished her question to Cohen. So the whole 5 minutes was pretty much conducted under the direction of a convicted pedophile. And this dialogue, Ms. Plaskett was reached by phone Thursday Plaskett declined to answer questions about the text messages and directed all inquiries to congressional staff. Plaskett's chief of staff said Thursday she was not in a position to confirm or not whether the Congresswoman was texting with Mr. Epstein at the hearing. She did not respond to follow-up questions. Bottom line, these are facts. These are text messages. This wasn't smoke and mirrors. So it's interesting that they're taking that tact. But, Mr. Speaker, how much time do I have left?
Gentleman has 6.5 minutes remaining.
I reserve.
Gentleman from South Carolina reserves. Gentleman from Maryland.
I'm yielding 1 minute to the representative from New York, Ms. Clark.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today on behalf of the Congressional Black Caucus, the conscience of the Congress, in strong opposition to this resolution. This resolution is a blatantly partisan, shameless attack. As we sit here today, Donald Trump is still the single person in this country with the authority and the ability to deliver justice to survivors and truth to the American people by just releasing the files. So instead of answering why Donald Trump chooses every single day not to release the Epstein files, they're pointing fingers at this side of the aisle. Mr. Speaker, unlike the president, Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett has committed no crime, violated no rule, and broken no promises. There has been no investigation, no due process, no inquiry into whether the Congresswoman had any connection whatsoever to Epstein's despicable and disgusting criminal conduct. This resolution would have us remove a capable and hardworking member of one of the most serious working committees in this body on the basis of a conversation from more than 6 years ago, which broke no rules, and has no connection to any criminal activity. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this partisan resolution, this sham, and I yield back.
Gentlewoman's time has expired.
We reserve.
Gentleman from Maryland reserves. Gentleman from South Carolina.
Speaker, I reserve.
Gentleman from South Carolina reserves.
And we're prepared to close.
It's closed.
Yeah,
Gentleman.
I'm prepared to close.
All right. Gentleman from South Carolina is prepared to close. Maryland is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I want to start by addressing the young people who appear to be in the audience this evening, because I'm afraid some of my arguments are lost on some of our colleagues across the aisle suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. It seems to have completely warped their minds today, and they're not thinking clearly about the Constitution or about the rule of law. But the young people here will recognize, if they read this resolution, immediately what's wrong with it, because it's replete with phrases like this, that this one incident that they're referring to raises serious questions about the judgment and the integrity and the fitness to serve. Well, I think that's absurd, but in any event, if you think it raises serious questions, presumably you would want the answers to those questions. But you don't get answers by rushing to judgment and turning the whole process upside down. This resolution starts by saying we censure her, we remove her from committee, and the very next component of it says we direct the Committee on Ethics to conduct an investigation. That is the opposite of due process, and I hope at least future generations will understand that's not how we hold people accountable, whether it's under criminal law, under civil law, or under an ethics process, which they purport to want to be launching here. Again, go back to the George Santos standard. The reason we voted against just hanging him out to dry and censuring him and expelling him is because the process hadn't happened yet. And Democrats and Republicans together did it, but they're thinking in solely partisan terms. Even Matt Gaetz, accused of having sex with a 17-year-old, was never censured by the House of Representatives. Even with Speaker McCarthy and others condemning him for what he did, we did not censure him. Think about what you're doing to the precedents of this body by trying to attack Ms. Plaskett. And let me just close with a personal thought. I wasn't going to bring it up because I didn't want to embarrass her, but she was one of the 3 finest students I ever had in constitutional law. She was a straight A student in the early 1990s. She's a straight A student in the 21st century. I'm proud not only that she was my student, but that she's my friend and that she's my colleague, and you don't disgrace us in any way. You go to work every day for the people of Virgin Islands, and we're proud of you. And with that, I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I find it interesting that the president is occupying the minds of my good friend on the left rent-free. And it's interesting they bring him up every time, and keep doing it. Keep doing it. This president's got a record that is second to none. And I hope our listeners in the audience can distinguish between just words and babbling on when they reject the facts of what's been presented. Texts don't lie. And they can offer all the excuses. And I do think Ms. Plaskett is a nice lady. She made a mistake here, a bad mistake. She took advice from a convicted pedophile that is indefensible in this discussion here today. Mr. Speaker, I've listened to my colleagues defend the indefensible. I've heard everything from this is old news to this is just politics. But not a single person has disputed the key fact. Written records in Epstein's own estate documents show Delegate Plaskett sought his input for an official hearing. This is the issue, that alone. Everything else is just noise. This chamber cannot overlook that a sitting member of Congress coordinated with a convicted sex offender to prepare questions for an official proceeding. Imagine telling the American people that that's acceptable. Imagine explaining to parents all across this country that Congress sees no problem with relying on the counsel of a predator of our innocent children. Some of my colleagues want to blur the edges, soften the facts, or bury this under procedural fog, noise as I call it. But sunlight is the best disinfectant, and accountability is not optional. This resolution is not excessive at all. It is appropriate. It is measured. It is necessary at this time. The question before us is very simple. Do we uphold a minimal standard for ethical conduct, or do we just shrug and say, well, maybe next time? Mr. Speaker, the public deserves better. The House deserves better. The American people deserve better. I urge adoption of this resolution, and I yield the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Without objection, the previous question is ordered on the resolution. The question is on the adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Yeah. Welcome to procedural democracy.
For what purpose does the gentleman seek recognition?
I request a recorded vote, and I challenge the Speaker's interpretation of the voice vote.
Does the gentleman ask for the yeas and nays?
I ask for the ayes and the nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed.